set it up too early.
We were too efficient. Is that what you're saying? That's okay. As long as we don't have an echo, that's the most important part. That was a fun one. All right, we good to go? All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Everyone, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, to get us started, Madam Clerk, could we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pulaski.
Here.
Trustee Berkshire.
Here.
Trustee Delapenna.
Here.
Trustee Domke is absent. Trustee Lanisa.
Here.
Trustee Perkowski.
Here.
Trustee Trejo.
Here. Thank you so much. We'll move to presentation of the prepared agenda. Is there a motion to approve as presented? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion passes. We'll now move to Village Board public comment. We have two parts on the agenda for this. This one is dedicated towards any action items. So anyone wishing to provide a comment on a topic or an agenda item may address the Village Board this time. Madam Clerk, do we have any submitted in advance?
We have one. The question is, what is the status of the train horn quiet zone project that has been ongoing for nearly 20 years?
Would the village administrator like to comment on that?
And just so the board does know, we received a separate email from, we assume this individual, but they indicated their name is anonymous, but we did receive a direct.
Really hard to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Some reverb.
Regarding the train horn, and I gave the board an update, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. And we did respond to who we believe was this resident directly through email. So yes, this has been going on, I think, since 2014 regarding pursuit of a quiet zone, or at least pursuit of some direction from those agencies that regulate train horns in the crossing as far as what options the board may be able to consider to institute a quiet zone. Most recently, it was in 2018, 2019, where the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration, responded to the village's application for a quiet zone, telling us that they did not have jurisdiction and therefore pointed us back to the Illinois Commerce Commission, as they said they were the ones who had control over the quiet zone. We reached out to them. It took them a while to get back to us, at which time they told us, there's not much we can do for you. Please reach out to Metra as the operator of the railroad and see if you can't reach consensus on a quiet zone. And if and when you do, come back to us and talk to us then. Along comes a pandemic. We reached out to Metra, didn't really get much of a response until recently we re-engaged with them asking for a status, and they sent the mayor a letter basically saying the ICC has jurisdiction over the train line and will be sounding horns until told otherwise by the ICC. So we are now back to the ICC. We have an engineering consultant who has helped us kind of design a potential quiet zone that fulfilled the FRA requirements at the time. So we've asked them to, again, follow back up with the state agency, the ICC, to see what in fact the village can do to get a firm response related to what it could take to obtain a 24-hour quiet zone, knowing that we currently have a 5-hour quiet zone. And we are waiting for a response from our engineering consultants. Once they hear back from the ICC, I'll be able to provide the board another update.
And I'll just add to that, we've leveraged our relationship with Mayor Craig and Hanover Park, who's on the Metro Board, to help get us some answers from that side of things. And when we've had opportunities with our Springfield representatives, we've brought this up. So we just hosted Seth Lewis for mobile office hours. We brought it up with him, and I'll be hosting Representative Mussman tomorrow, and it will be also a topic of concern to discuss with them as we're being shuffled around from agency to agency. So.
Do you want me to call?
Yep, no other submitted comments, correct?
There's no others.
Is there anyone in the public body that'd like to make a public comment at this time? Terry, you're free to come on up. Whatever you're comfortable with, as long as we can hear you in the microphone.
Good evening, everybody.
Oh, could you bring it down a little bit closer? There you go. Perfect.
Sorry. Good evening, everybody. My name is Terry Erickson. I was here, as many of you know, June 14th to address this very board about some concerns and frustrations that I have had. Right after I spoke, I was immediately contacted by a few members of village administration. And I'm very happy to say that in the 6 weeks since, there has been several communications, several resolutions, and several things in the works. We have a long ways to go. There's always something that needs to be done. But since I was on public record back in June, sharing my frustrations and concerns, I feel it's the right thing to do to go back on public record to say that I am thoroughly pleased with the response that I had to that talk. I am very appreciative to David and Brian and Chief Heron and other people. And we had a meeting, we had very good discussions. And like I said, I just want to publicly express my appreciation for the attitude, the concern, and the thoughtfulness. And to this point, a couple of items that have already either been resolved or on their way to being resolved. That's the way I've always believed it should work. I'm very happy to be able to stand here today and say that I finally feel comfortable with the Village of Roselle administration. Thank you very, very much for what you've done. I look forward to future interactions with such a great group of people.
Thank you, Terry, so much. Anyone else wish to share a public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to officials and staff reports. Under mayor, I have nothing to add tonight. Any village trustees have a report to add? Seeing none, we'll move to village clerk.
None.
We'll move to village attorney. Village administrator.
I just want to recognize Karen Schultz for her 22 years of service with the village. She will be retiring 2 weeks from tomorrow. And just wanted to make sure the board knew that and could recognize her commitment to the organization, both in the finance department as well as deputy clerk. And with that, just wanted to say thank you. And we'll have a little something for her on her last day, but wanted to use this public meeting to certainly recognize her longtime service as a resident and employee of the village. So thank you.
It's so nice that Patty decided to take vacation so you can enjoy your last opportunity to be with us. So thank you so much for all the work you've done for the village. We'll move to unfinished business on tonight's consent agenda. We have 2 items. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, or non-controversial in nature and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no discussion of these items. Tonight, we have presentation approval of the village board minutes from July 2nd, 2021, and adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an amendment to an agreement between the Village of Roselle and the DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group regarding participation in the Special Conditions Work Plan extension. Is there a motion from the board to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. We'll move to community development. Trustee Berkshire.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion to conduct a public hearing for the annexation of 556 Lincoln Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of opening the public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Yes.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none? That carries.
So I'm looking to Karen, is there any updates on the, do you want to go through the updates on the sidewalk?
So in the staff report, you guys can see there is an update on the sidewalk. After receiving the feedback from the board at the last meeting, Public Works did a more extensive analysis of the costs associated with extending the sidewalk. We discovered that the neighbor sidewalk is actually on private property. So we'd have to get an easement in order to replace that sidewalk. So the new plan is to shift it onto the parkway where it should be located. And then with the various grading concerns, the total cost estimated by Public Works would be about $12,000. This is about 40% more than we originally estimated. So the annexation agreement as written includes how the board directed me at the previous meeting. So any updates to that would require an amendment to the annexation agreement on the dais tonight.
I don't think I'm ready to make that kind of an amendment, but nor am I in agreement that this homeowner should pay something of this magnitude for a sidewalk. And nor am I in agreement that we shouldn't have a sidewalk because we fought that. So what alternatives, what options, what do we have that even if we have to push the sidewalk back, it doesn't have to be on the parkway, so we don't have to deal with all the extra construction and stuff. So what other alternatives do we have? If we
Can you hear me okay? All right, so we just went out and looked at this before the meeting, as the question arose. There is a ditch in that area. It will be challenging to make the adjustment to make it be a carriage walk, as that ditch does need to be maintained. So we would have to look at that a little bit further to determine how feasible that is. I didn't have enough information prior to be able to look at that and come with an answer regarding that adjustment.
I think we need to do that because those who were, well, there's two of us that are still on the board who went through quite a bit of consultation with residents, with the board itself about annexations, sidewalks and the like. And I'm not about to just throw that out. And so we definitely need to have something. I'm not in agreement for them to pay for a sidewalk and then not get something and we use it someplace else. So I guess we're at a point where we're going to have to maybe defer this then until we get more answers.
And before we continue, Trustee Berkshire, could we just state the public notice was?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
Fine.
have my little cheat sheet. So yes, I
was wondering,
Forgot that.
like, do we have to?
I wasn't sure if we had to or not because I didn't have my cheat sheet. But yes, a public notice was
Was posted and served.
posted. Yes.
July 9th.
Thank you.
And then I guess if it comes down to it, I would also want to understand when you said that we would have to amend.
Yeah, so all I meant by that was the agreement as written has them paying the $4,900 as I was directed. If the board wants to change that amount on the dais, someone would need to amend the annexation agreement to say a specific amount before adopting it.
From my position, I would not want to amend that. That would be what I would see as a reasonable cost and what is most likely our costs when it comes to other annexations. So we would be in that same ballpark. So I wouldn't look to that. But then I would also look to see what we can do as a village, both as options, like, you know, Karen, as you go and take the team out there to take a look to see what other alternatives we might have, as well as then to see what the village would do in terms of keeping the sidewalk, but then obviously picking up some of the additional expenditures because it wouldn't be fair for this homeowner. So, is there any other questions from the audience on?
I think one thing I'd just like to ask before, or I guess as you go back, Karen, if we were to continue this until the next meeting, is there any repercussions from a public notice deadline that would prevent us from taking this up at the next board meeting?
No.
And I'd be curious, since I know we have the petitioner here, if we needed an extra 2 weeks to make sure that we can finalize the costs associated with the sidewalk, is that something that would be detrimental to your project timeline, or is that something you guys are open to? Okay, so I mean, you're fine waiting another 2 weeks essentially to finalize the. Okay. Just want to make sure before.
And then is there any other questions or comments from the board? Oh, sorry, Lee.
No, so I agree with what Bruce said. You know, we went through this a long time ago with the sidewalk issue, and I know this might be more of a unique situation in terms of having this other driveway that has to be touched and sidewalk that needs to be laid. But I do think we need to stick with our, you know, original policy that we laid out or amend it. So if we want to amend it and bring it back with potential additional caveats, that's fine with me. The question that I have though on this driveway culvert, is that really necessary for the sidewalk to be installed, or is that an opportunity for the village to enhance like the stormwater drainage? Because to me, that might be two separate issues too that could be potentially pulled out of this.
Yeah, there are two separate issues. You know, there's that existing driveway culvert underneath that driveway. In order to enclose that system, you'd have to install a storm sewer the entire length of that property down to the corner. And I don't have enough information to see that if that would even be feasible to do that at this point.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the type of nuance that we could potentially look at if we want to amend the policy to say, hey, if there's additional drainage that, you know, could help with alleviate stormwater that's not really connected to the sidewalk, like maybe the homeowner doesn't necessarily need to pay that. And then the other thing is, you know, we could potentially look at, you know, some sort of grant program if adjacent properties are causing an issue or anything like that, you know, that we could bring back to the board. But I just think that right now, I don't necessarily have all the information to really make the final call on what the homeowner should pay. I think it should be fair, not only to the current homeowner that's in front of us now, but to future homeowners as well as they come in and annex into the village. And I want to make sure that there's fairness across the board throughout the village.
I agree with that. I don't really want to charge the homeowner something that seems unreasonable. And I think the original amount seemed reasonable, as much as I don't like to pay the extra amount myself either as a village. I mean, I think that's fair that we just charge them what we were going to charge them originally.
Okay, so when you say the work is already done, it says in our notes that your well is failing and the age of the septic system is unknown. Is that the work you're referring to being connected to the utilities already? Okay, so the annexation can take as long as you want. You already have what you need? Okay, I just wanted to make sure, sorry.
I think the only thing I agree overall with the sentiment of the board and whatnot. I think one thing that we could consider is instead of changing the sidewalk policy itself or amending it, we could consider, you know, maybe an incentive program to help with just annexations period. That would be kind of a parallel thing that could assist to either attract people to incorporate into the village or provide relief in these extenuating circumstances where there's engineering barriers to entry that might make inequity in application. So that'd be my thought, is don't touch the sidewalk policy period. We've done a lot of work to get that where we are. And maybe consider enhancing it with just a separate policy that could be budgeted for or incorporated to help these types of situations, or just in general to help promote incorporation in the village overall, would be my only 2 cents to share.
And Mr. Mayor, I think I would agree with that wholeheartedly, because as I'm thinking about some of the challenges that we had when we were doing the whole pre-annexation piece, and some of the residents that came in, their issue was there was not enough space for a sidewalk to even be put in because of the culverts and the ditches and the like. So we need to kind of think on that in that terms, because we may be able to incentivize some of the folks that are still on a pre-annexation and bring it in. And then we don't have to go in front of the news media once again and show how they cannot put a sidewalk on their property because of. So that would be ideal. And with nothing else, I do have to make a motion to close the public hearing. So I'm making a motion.
Bruce, since there's still issues associated with the terms of the annexation agreement that have not been resolved, based on a request for additional factual information, probably the more appropriate motion would be to continue the public hearing.
Okay.
To a date certain, and identify what that date would be, so staff can get the work done, and then proceed, reopen it for that limited purpose, only to discuss the annexation issue, no longer have any public comment or the like, and proceed in that fashion. But that's just because ordinarily I would agree that you could close it, but we do have annexation issues still open.
Okay.
It may be the subject of further public discussion.
So Jason, what would be that next date?
If it's simply just updating engineering costs. Sorry, I think clarification on what you want from staff, if it's simply just revisiting that sidewalk estimate as prepared by engineering to reflect a different path or something else less costly, we can do that. If it's this more holistic review of incentives and some discussion points around that, I would request a little more time.
So I would like to take that as two separate items. Since we've got the public hearing open regarding this particular property, let's look at this particular instance. What options do we have? What suggestions might there be? What is the recommendation for this property? Then we know where we need to go, because I'm sure other circumstances like this will come up, and we'll deal with that as a separate entity. Maybe what we'll do is in one of the new businesses coming up in the near future, we could add that as an agenda item and talk about and give staff proper direction. That would be my suggestion and recommendation. I'm looking at head nods here. Does everyone else on the board agree?
I agree.
I think we can come back on the 9th. I know Karen Bricks won't be here, but I think from an engineering perspective, it seems like we're kind of pivoting now more towards just that number. I think we can come back at the 9th, and if you still need more information, you can continue it. Jim, is that correct, to another board meeting?
That's correct. And
That way, at least you have something back, and if you need further information, then you can revisit extending it again.
And I think that'd be perfect, because again, the homeowners are whole. So that was, thank you, Tom, for bringing that up, because it would be concerning if they weren't. And now it's just a matter of trying to find the best option for them. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to continue the public hearing for the annexation agreement of 556 Lincoln Street until August 9th.
Second.
All right.
Who's the second? I'm
Me.
sorry. Tom.
First one.
Any discussion on that continuation? I'm assuming not. That being said, Madam Clerk, whenever you're ready, could we do a roll call, please?
Trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Della Penna, or
Aye.
I'm sorry. Trustee Prokowski,
Aye.
trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della Penna,
Aye.
trustee Linnaeus.
Aye.
Thank you.
And that motion carries. We'll continue the debate at the August 9th. I had to check the month there for a second meeting. And we'll continue on then. You're done. It's short, nice
Yes,
for you
I was
today.
gonna say, thank you, Mr. Mayor, because as of that continuation, both 9B and 9C must come back on the 9th.
All right, thank you so much. We have nothing under administration, fire, police, or public works. So trustee Linnae, you're up. Or Lenisa, rather, sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the accounts payable list for July 26th of 2021 in the amount of $1,642,377.91.
Second.
Any discussion on the bills? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Yes.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? That motion passes. We'll move to new business. We have another time for public comment. Anyone wishing to provide comment on a topic or agenda item may address the village board during this time yet again. So anyone in the public wish to make a comment at this time?
I have one to read.
All right, thank you.
Realizing the majorities of respondents desired in the non-binding referendum, the sale marijuana businesses, it will probably be approved by the board at some time point in the near future. I just have a few reasons why I give another viewpoint. Number one, a very small voter turnout isn't a true indicator of the village. Maybe a larger turnout would have led to the same result, but we will never know. Number two, having only one P&Z meeting to discuss the topic and then throwing this up for the board is, in my opinion, not enough to allow for a full analysis. Three, we have no information on what our present businesses in town think about marijuana being sold. Would it be possible to add their voices to our data collection? Four, once the genie is out of the bottle, approval, we would have a tough time reversing our decision. One-way legislation such as this should be done after full research. Five, finally, the board will be responsible for this down the road. Make sure you realize this. And this is from Wayne.
That's Wayne Domke, our fellow trustee.
sorry.
Can't be with us. Yeah. Nope, not a problem. Any other public comment in the room? Seeing none, we'll move to our first item. So Karen, you're not off the hook yet. We have a presentation on the cannabis amendments based on the, oh, you should go grab her. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, whenever you're ready. You're welcome. Thank you for, customer service is our number one priority, so.
So Plan Commission had their public hearing about the cannabis zoning ordinance text amendments earlier this month. And in my staff report, I kind of created a chart that showed staff's recommendations versus what Plan Commission recommended. Obviously, you guys know you don't have to take either of our recommendations. You guys can do anything you want. However, P&Z took, I think, pretty great care in discussing each of these items. So for dispensary, I had recommended special use in B2, B4, B5. B3 was left out, that's the town center district. P&Z recommended including B3, and then added a condition that any dispensary or cannabis use in general would need to meet off-street parking requirements. So the intent of that is that any property that a dispensary or other business would locate within would have to have a parking lot that could serve them. So you can't get something next to 1913 or something like that because there is no parking lot to meet the off-street parking requirements. But it still allows locations on East Irving Park Road and Lawrence, kind of that general area. So it doesn't entirely eliminate the zoning district, but provides some protection for businesses in the town center that are already struggling to meet parking demands. The other cannabis business establishments, which are transportation, infusing, cultivation center, craft grower, and processing, recommended as special use in manufacturing, office research industrial, and then office research industrial, business park, and high cube. Both recommendations were the same. I had recommended a security plan be reviewed and approved by the police department. P&Z continue with that recommendation as well. It's in the act itself, but it gives us another layer of protection to make sure that our police department knows the intricacies and goings on of the business as for security and things like that. And then I had recommended, or staff had recommended, prohibition of on-site consumption. Plan Commission, they wanted to stay silent. They didn't want to overregulate the use. They wanted to allow the state regulations to sort of take precedence. However, the state law basically says you can do it or you cannot do it, but you have to say what you're going to do. So staff is continuing to recommend a prohibition of on-site consumption. But again, that's something for the board to describe. And then I had created some bullet points of other topics that I've heard the board had maybe wanted to discuss, particularly special versus permitted. So I kind of created a bit of a pros and cons list of how that works. Obviously, a special use gives us more control over a use. You can put conditions on the use no matter what its location and be part of the special use process. If this use is permitted, it's really just a staff checklist of making sure they're meeting all of our own requirements. So you can still put conditions in it. It would just be part of the definition and reliance on staff without any sort of public hearing or public input. Sort of went into a bit more of a description on the B3 recommendation. And then drive-throughs, hours of operation, and signage. I didn't have any real recommendation on hours of operation. It seems to be sort of self-regulating. Looked around at what other towns are doing or what other dispensaries are doing. Typically, they open between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., typically close between 9 and 10 at night. And then a lot of them have shortened hours on Sundays. So if the board wants to sort of dictate an hours of operation, we can definitely add that into our definition. Drive-throughs are prohibited by the act, so we can add that to the act, to our personal ordinance as well, prohibiting it, but it's in the act. So it's not technically necessary. And then the act regulates marketing of the dispensaries near schools, parks, daycares, et cetera. There's about a 1,500-foot buffer that they're not allowed to do any sort of marketing within. So staff doesn't recommend doing any regulations regarding signage because of recent Supreme Court cases that have ruled that you can't regulate signage based on content. So that's the zoning aspect of everything.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Before I open up, I just want to thank staff's time on doing a lot of research on this topic. You know, I think looking back, we've been talking about this for over 2 years now. We've extended our moratorium twice or 3 times maybe at this point to allow extra time, did the referendum, and we've done a lot of great work. I paid attention to the meeting that was held by the Planning and Zoning Commission. I echo your comments that I think they provided some great insights and they had some really robust debates. So with that being said, I'm going to recommend that we take up dispensaries first and kind of do it by dispensary, and then we'll go to other business establishments, and that way we can kind of divide it up and conquer. So that, Trustee Berkshire.
So I'm going to kind of work my way backwards, and I pick and choose. So I'm going to do a little a la carte. On the on-site consumption, I am 100% in agreement with keeping it prohibited. I think that shouldn't happen. When it comes to conditions, I like what the P&Z recommendation has, both the security plan and the off-street parking, because it could become chaotic as you start bringing more and more of these folks in. Then when I go into the dispensary on the special use, I'm fine with the zoning that they have. I am not in favor with the special use now after reading your bullet. So thank you for providing that clarity. There's just way too much, I'll say, red tape for special use if it's going to take a business to come in for 2 to 4 months before they can operate. If I were a bar or a liquor store, I don't need to go through such a thing. And that is just as bad. It's just the fact that we have a mindset and a preconditioned, and we've been preconditioned all these years of how bad this is. And I'm not saying, but alcohol is no different in my opinion. So therefore, I would rather have that go to a permitted use But what I would like before we do anything is I would like to see staff's checklist, and that we, the board, should review and, identify what that checklist is, so that we can at least make sure that it covers some of the concerns that maybe the village themselves has, as well as any of the members of the board. That would be my proposal.
Other comments, or trustee Trejo?
All right, so I'm gonna take a little bit of the menu option too, as Bruce did. So first on the dispensary, I actually agree with the original staff recommendation, and excluding B3. I agree that it should be special use. I think, in my opinion, we'll probably have max one of these businesses in the village. If there's more, that's fine, but I do think that the special use makes sense, and I think it makes sense from a couple of reasons. Number one, we did do the referendum on the ballot. It was roughly, I think, 60-40. So I just want to make sure that, this could be a time where we could just unify behind something together where we say, hey, we give a nod to the 40%, make sure that the board's involved with this type of establishment coming into the village. I don't think 2 to 4 weeks time or 2 to 4 months is a big deal for a business that wants to establish here. I do agree that the security plan should be approved by the police department, and if needed, have the off-street parking requirements if it's still required, excluding the B3. And then I think I said on-site. I'm totally in agreement with that being prohibited.
All right, other comments?
Sure, I'm looking at the staff recommendation as is, with the exception of I would add the off-street parking. I do want to address one thing that Bruce said though in his comments before we started. We only get to deal with the residents who voted and the results of that. The results could be different if more people voted, but the people that are registered voters have a chance to vote, and they didn't. So
My comment?
I'm Wayne. I'm sorry. I said, no, I was looking at Bruce. I'm sorry, Wayne. No, I mean, we only get to deal with the people that voted, and it wasn't a lot, but they took the time to vote. So that has bearing with me.
So real quick, just I'm keeping score here. You're for or against on-site consumption?
I am for the staff recommendation as is, except add the off-street parking.
Got it. Thank you. That helps. So let me just. Okay, thank you.
And I believe the same thing. I was going down the staff recommendations, but I do like the off-street parking as well.
Trustee. Sorry.
All the staff recommendations except throw on the off-street parking. And then also just to kind of address Bruce, the comparison to the liquor store, I think is very, very apt. It's just that right now with those licenses that they're going to have to get through the state, basically through a lottery, I think that allows a bit for special use because it's kind of like they've already shown, there's a lot more to this process of opening the dispensary already than it would be to a liquor store. And kind of going off of, I believe, Lee, it's kind of people haven't necessarily all come around on it. So the more control over we have, I think that we can make more people comfortable if we can kind of keep that special use. So overall, great recommendations, I think.
I guess that's where my position was, is they're already going through special use through the state. So we as the village can simply do it as a permit along with we have checklists, but it seems that the board's more into tune for special use, and I'm not going to oppose just simply for that matter.
Trustee Trejo?
2 more comments. So I just want to address too, like the zoning, because originally I was kind of on the fence and kind of more leaning towards just the industrial areas. But then last meeting, I think when Bruce had mentioned it, I did take the trip out to Schaumburg just to kind of check out the exterior, the way that the building looked, and I thought everything was fine. So that's where I kind of got around to allowing it in B2, B4, B5. And then no offense to our friends in Springfield, but I don't necessarily trust everything that they do, if you will. So I would rather have the local control and have us give the final say in terms of go, no go. So at some point we could shift it to a permitted use. It might be fine. I just think the first time, initially, I think we should have it as special use, kind of see how it goes and, potentially change it down the line.
All right, so just to make it clear before we move on to the next one. So for dispensaries, at least the pulse of the board is we're not going to allow on-site consumption. We're not going to include B3, but we'll continue on with staff's recommendation with the additional comment from P&Z to meet off-street parking requirements in the zoning ordinance. and we'll keep it a special use. And I'd say we can probably use this opportunity to continue to evaluate and try to streamline our special use practices. So hopefully it doesn't become as big of a burden as it has been maybe in the past for some applicants. Let's move on to then other cannabis business establishments. So there was a agreement in terms of the recommendation there. So I think it's about, let's get a pulse on the zoning as well as special use or permitted on this one. I'll open it up. Anyone want to jump in? Trustee Kowski.
This is going to be probably an odd question, but for cultivation centers, would that then become a farmland assessment for tax purposes?
No,
I don't believe so.
I don't believe
Taxed
so.
separately under state law.
Yeah, because it would be within a building, so that in and of itself is going to create tax assessments because it's an improvement. So I don't think so.
Good question. though.
Mhm.
It's not an agricultural use by definition.
Do you have an opinion on the zoning or the special use or permitted question on that?
Oh, I agree with staff recommendations. I was just curious about the tax implications of an actual cultivation center.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Trejo.
I'm good with the staff recommendation, special use and M or in the zoning districts outlined.
Okay, I'm gonna mix it up so we don't go down there. Trustee Lanisa, I'm gonna throw you in the mix.
I'm good with the staff recommendations.
All right. Trustee Delpino.
I am as well.
Trustee Berkshire.
They are the same. I'm good with both.
Perfect. All right. Any other comments from the board? I mean, I know there's additional stuff that was dropped in there from staff as far as hours of operation and other things of that nature. Any specific thoughts from the group on that? Trustee Trejo?
I just want to echo what you said at the beginning. Just thanks to staff for all the time that you guys put into this. I know, again, we delayed this. We pushed it back. We wanted to do the research that we needed to do to get things right. The only other thing though, too, is do we have to talk about the tax that you want to do on this? So.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Taxes, hours, we'll call it the miscellaneous round, potpourri.
I just want to, reiterate, as the mayor had indicated, thanks for all the support that you guys gave in looking into all this.
And the patience for all of it as we've gone through
Yeah.
this many times over. So greatly appreciated.
And I want to thank the voters too that gave their opinion.
Absolutely. Democracy is a participation sport. You gotta show up. Go ahead, Tom.
I know you said that it tends to regulate itself. Do you think we should maybe just have hours kind of similar to what we have for liquor stores, just so we have something on the books? Would you recommend that?
That's what I had kind of looked up. It seems like that's definitely something that can be done and can be added to the ordinance. I guess the only concern would be like, I don't know if the act regulates, like, can it, do you know, Jim, if a dispensary could be open 24 hours? Was that in the act?
It's not.
Okay.
It's just
So I guess the
silent
concern
on
would-
that issue. Seems to me, Karen, not to take you off the hook here, but it might be a real good question for the police chief. Because it is a partial law enforcement issue, because you can't operate vehicles under the influence of cannabis. So as a consequence, the police chief may have some insights into that.
It is.
Sorry.
Not sure. So I would follow, if we're looking for hours, I would follow the recommendation we're doing with liquor opening at 6 a.m., closing at a reasonable hour. The later in the evening you go, the more chance for potential issues that there are. So I would think the liquor shuts down between 11 and 2 a.m., depending on the day of the week. I would assume that it would be an appropriate time frame for cannabis distribution as well. So the consumption in a vehicle, whether it's legal or illegal, whichever substance it is still unlawful. They can't consume it in there. It has to be within the original containers. There's a whole series of regulations. So having it, it's just like a liquor store. So I would treat it just as we would a liquor store or liquor establishment.
Trustee Trejo?
I just have a follow-up question on that, though. The one concern I have with the difference between the liquor and the cannabis is I believe it's an all cash business. So do we have any concerns along that in terms of, I mean, to me, I see the closings typically between 9 and 10 p.m. To me, I think that's reasonable. But just wanted to get your point of view on that.
It is an all cash business as of right now. The banks do not recognize bank cards. So that is the one. What we've done in the past, when we were looking at medical marijuana, we had looked at cash drops. So there's a sequence, how you do, how we do deposits, how we're doing runs with either Brinks companies or something. So there is procedures that would follow. Most of it, if it's cash, is generally taken to the back room. It's in a secure area. Those are all things that we would go through with any business, cash only business.
Got it. So I just guess my question is there any risk, additional risk in terms of criminal activity if these were allowed to be later on at night due to the cash nature of the business in your assessment?
There's always, with cash only, there's always a higher risk because it's obviously cash.
Right. I meant being open past 10. Or is it the same risk?
I would say it's the same risk.
Got it.
Once you get past about that 1 o'clock hour is when we start seeing generally behaviors change. We see people coming into town to do things rather than a travel of town. So again, my own personal feeling is after about 1 a.m. is when we start seeing a change in demographics.
Got it. Yeah. So with that, I would say, we could always change this at a future date. I think we should just keep it consistent with some of the other dispensaries in the area, call it 9, 10 o'clock, and then reevaluate as we see it opening. If we think everything's going good, we could always allow them to expand.
Well, and I think based on the line of questioning, I don't want to pull on a suggestion that Bruce had earlier. Maybe when we go to vote on an action plan on this or to actually enact it as an ordinance, maybe we can have some draft templates put together for this additional security review. I would think these are exact things that police are going to be asking them and kind of how are we managing that? What are we using that information to inform our decisions and whatnot? So something that we can kind of use to understand our policy internally, but also to help share with the community as far as what steps we're taking to ensure the safety of the community overall.
And the act addresses a lot of that as well, not to interject, but it's the paragraphs describing the security plans they have to submit to the state are incredibly lengthy and boring, as you can imagine. So it's like you have to have a bank vault, you have to have separate security systems, you have to have separate PIN numbers for different employees into the security system. So they've tried to do a good job of protecting everyone for the cash business.
And just to wrap up before I go to Bruce, any opinion on the tax?
Oh, 3%.
Okay.
That's the max we could do, right?
Correct. And that's what every community as staff has provided has done. So that would be in keeping with that. Bruce?
Since we're combining them now, I would go with something aligned like the 8 to 10 and then hours, 8 to 11. I mean, I think that's reasonable. It means people might be getting off their shift, can still catch it before. And then same thing in the morning and then the 3%. So.
Perfect. Cheryl or other Tom?
No, I agree with that. I think if we cut it off too early, we're going to just limit the market for the people that want to put one here. If we say 9 o'clock and all the other towns around us are midnight or 11 o'clock, they'd rather go there because it's more revenue.
3%, sorry, Tom?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
fine with
I
that.
assumed, but I don't want to. Sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
I'll say the 3% first, because that's the
Thank you.
easiest one. And then as far as the hours, I would stick with the same thing that the liquors are having, because I think to start off, it makes more sense.
And then Tom to my right,
3%.
3%. And then hours, you were good with liquor or?
Yeah, that's what I said before.
Okay. So going with 3%, and it sounds like we're going to mirror what we have currently on the book for our liquor ordinance there. So any other questions that we have not addressed through comments right now? All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. So we'll have this on the board for final action then coming up here soon. We'll move on to our next one. Tom, our June's treasurer's report, as well as our mid-year budget review.
Everybody's waiting.
bigger presentation than normal, so I've got a folder. Well, good evening. June marks the halfway point of the year, making it a good time to review the financial results so far and look forward to the end of the year. The board packet contains 2 items from finance, the June treasurer's report and the mid-year review memo. When the budget was developed over 10 months ago, we were just approaching the late fall and anticipating another surge in the pandemic. Revenues were uncertain, and some items were deferred to this mid-year review or removed from the budget entirely. We have a little more clarity on our revenues and hearing 3%. That's good, thank you. And hopefully somebody will move in, but anticipate savings in our largest expenditure category, which is salaries, due to vacancies in some departments. First, though, in the packet, there is the June treasurer's report. And as we did last month, I have some slides showing the highlights from the report rather than me going through the whole report. The complete report is in the agenda packet, and you can read it at your leisure. June is a big month for revenues since the first installment of the DuPage County property taxes is due. And the village has received just about half of the expected property taxes for the year. These taxes are used to fund operations to the end of the fiscal year. The first slide, which is up on the screen, shows the budget versus actual results for some general fund revenues. And you can see some of the village's largest revenue sources, which are sales tax, income tax, and local use tax, are exceeding budget expectations through June 30th. And overall, general fund revenues are approximately $482,000 higher than expected based on our recent history. Some are a little bit lower. Video gaming tax is lower, but that's because there were still a couple months that gaming was closed. Business licenses are down, of course. We did, as part of the pandemic, assist the businesses by cutting their licenses by 25%. And building permits are a little bit lagging, but if you look in the report, building permits are up this year again compared to last year, and I think we'll have a little bit more revenue coming in later this year. This next slide shows an overview of the general fund departments. Since this is comparing 2021 to 2020, some departments, and it looks like a lot of departments, are much higher than last year, but items such as membership fees, DUCOM, some of our fees, they were cut or eliminated entirely as our partners cut their fees for the year, or just like I said, eliminated membership dues. Although expenditures are higher in these departments, revenues over expenditures in the general fund is still $787,513. Some June highlights. Sales tax is 8.1% higher than, and I'm using 2019 because 2020 is garbage, but sales tax is 8.1% higher than the same period in 2019. Eating tax is 5.1% higher than 2019. Like I said earlier, property tax collections nearly 50% due to receipt of DuPage County. Finance is still waiting for Cook County EAV and extension information. I actually got that today in draft form. I made a note. If the numbers do not change, total EAV in the village increased 2.57%. Cook County was very minimal. I think it was about 35,000. So the bulk of that change came from DuPage. But we'll see if they finalize the numbers and when we'll expect to get that. I'm hoping that our property tax bills in Cook County go out on time, but if you've been reading the news, there's a lot of infighting over that. And finally, I just wanted to highlight there were 794 restaurant rewards credits given to our residents for a total of $19,850. And looking at it another way, there was over $79,400 that our residents spent in local restaurants in order to get those rewards. And in fact, a lot of people sent in more than $100. I don't know if they were thinking they would get more of the credit, but still, it was good to see there were there were a lot of people that sent in their rewards application. Pardon me. And as a result, 794 received that credit. So I thank the board for approving that program. And in your packet tonight is a memo and a scorecard that highlight items that were budgeted but deferred until mid-year budget review. Items removed from the budget or reduced in size prior to the budget or unbudgeted items that have come up this year and are recommended by staff. And to provide a little bit of context to the board, this is a chart showing the revenues over expenditures over the last several fiscal years at June 30th, and then again at 12/31. And as they say in those commercials, if past results are indicative of future performance, we expect to end this fiscal year with a surplus again. What that will be, I don't know. When you look at this, discounting 2020 again, because we got the $1 million in CARES Act funds. On occasion, that number cuts in half, but most of the time, it's right around that same number if we used a chart with average. So, are we going to end at 780? I don't know. I can't answer that question. But based on what we've seen so far for revenues, one item that we discussed in the memo is if Metro 19 goes forward, the permit fees for Metro 19 are not included in the budget and are not included in here or in any of the analysis that we have. And then this final slide, I'll get to this in a little bit. This shows the fund balance at the end of each year from 2011 that is above the dollar amount that's above the policy at the time. So as you remember, we were at 35%. We went to 45%. So that last column is FY 2020. The amount over 45% is just over $2 million that we have in surplus. So just to provide you a little bit of context there. So going to the memo, I won't go through the bullet points again because I just went through them. But the following the items in the recommended, they were deferred to this review. We have several vehicles. We have the sidewalk replacement out in front of Village Hall, which we have requested to defer. The streetlight replacement program, reforestation program, thermoplastic pavement markings, and some pavement preservation. We'd like to do those items that were budgeted with your approval. There are a couple items, vehicles, which we would either purchase or I should say order or just defer them to next year. Vehicles, and there's a little bit of a paragraph at the end. Vehicles, if you've noticed, and I think a couple trustees have brought this up, both dealerships, there's very little inventory, but they are selling vehicles. That's nice to see. I do believe they're delivering them right to your home. But for the village, some of our items are quite large, and a lot of the pickup trucks are not available due to the chip shortage that's going on. And so we may be coming back in a future meeting to discuss some of those items that are in our plan for next year or on this sheet here that we'd like to order now to get them, so we get them in 2022. Because we, in finance, we may budget them this year. If we don't receive them to next year, they go on next year's books. So it's when we receive that item. So we would like to place some of these orders, and we'll have more information on that in the future. There are a couple items that were removed from the budget or just lessened, and one is the equipment replacement fund transfer. I had originally put it in at 500,000. We reduced that to 440, and I would request that we bring that back up to 500,000. We are in a good position, as I've noted, and I think the general fund can accept that $60,000 increase. Another item was the controlled burns, I believe at Goose Lake Park, that we'd like to bring back into the budget. And then the fire station overhead doors, which would be in the general capital projects fund, that price would be $52,800 that they would like to get those ordered and installed on the fire station. Lastly, there's some unbudgeted items that are recommended by staff to purchase. Several pieces of office furniture, the cubicles in the administration department. So if you've seen the cubicles that were installed in finance and community development, we'd like to do the same thing up in admin. Just kind of making an improved space for employees there. Plum Grove Road Bridge over I-390. We need to do a study, an engineering study to look at that bridge and what needs to be done. If we do this now, we can have that for the board workshop on capital later in August. And then tuck pointing over at Public Works. The buildings are getting old, as we know, but there needs to be some tuck pointing done, and we'd like to get that completed this year as well. And then the last piece is a network backup disaster recovery appliance. So we respectfully ask for those items to be brought back. I can bring that back as a budget amendment if needed, but approval on those items would be good. And then finally, sorry, not finally, but I do have one other thing. So talking about this chart here, the recently updated fund balance policy recommends a minimum fund balance in the general fund of 45%. And at the end of 2020, the general fund balance was 57% of expenditures, or 2,108,000 above that threshold. So staff recommends using 1 million, or approximately 1/2 of the amount exceeding the 45% threshold, for the specific purpose of enhancing the village's contribution to the police and firefighters pension funds by $250,000, and then transferring $750,000 to the general capital projects fund for capital needs. As the village board is quite aware, the steep decline in telecom tax is taking a toll on the general capital projects fund revenues, and staff will be discussing the need for this additional revenue at the upcoming capital projects workshop. So proposing the 750, we know there are several projects. In fact, we just heard again stormwater, another good use of this. The Plum Grove Road Bridge, we don't know what that's going to be. So we would like to enhance the general capital projects fund. And then finally, as noted earlier, the village and overall national economy continues to show strong rebounds. And although general fund revenues continue to outperform expectations, there are always concerns. There's always headwinds. One of those is inflation. We don't know. We haven't seen too much, but as everybody knows, the prices are going up in a lot of goods. Vehicles, again, we don't know what those vehicles are going to cost. Local use tax, so sales tax, the general fund, or the state of Illinois has changed the formula. Local use tax, we've seen it start to decrease now in the month of July, and we don't know where that's going to be, but that we have seen sales tax increase and then local use tax going down, and then that sharp decrease in telecom tax. Right now, it's at 21% lower than it was last year, so we continue to see that decrease. And then lastly, again, the American Rescue Plan Act, we just received word that instead of 2.78 million, that's now 3,053,000. So we'll be seeing an influx there. And then again, the $500,000 from Metro. So happy to answer any questions anybody might have on the treasurer's report or the mid-year budget.
Why don't we start with Sorry. Why don't we start with the treasurer's report for June 1st, just to get that out of the way before we jump to mid-year. So any questions or clarification on that piece? All right, then we'll jump to mid-year budget. Any comments or questions from the board on any of the recommendations?
I'm in alignment.
All right, we got one vote in alignment.
Go ahead.
I agree with staff recommendations.
Trustee Trejo.
I just have one quick question. I know Bruce and I have been on the finance planning committee, and one of the recommendations we made was to increase the contribution to the police and firefighter pension. Do we feel that, especially given that the telecommunication tax is going down, are we still comfortable with the 250, or should we do like an 80-20 where it's 800,000 to general capital projects and like 200K to pensions? Or is it not really that meaningful of a difference? I just wanted to get your opinion.
I just picked the 250. I think me and Jason and I were just talking about it at one point, and so it's up to the board. The 250, I was going to split 170, 175 and 75. So 175 to the police, 75 to fire, or I can do it 50-50, whichever your desire is, or if we do it to.
Well, is the question on the 250, the amount or
Yeah.
the split?
No,
So
the
it's really the
250,
250. How we split it, we haven't figured it out. Are you comfortable with $250,000 going to that pension?
And that's enough to cover the general capital, because like I said, one of the reasons why we came to this recommendation was, like we said, we have a budget policy for fund reserves. This is the taxpayers' money. We want to make sure that it's invested properly. So if we're shoring up the general capital projects fund, 750K, and you guys are comfortable with that, then I'm totally in alignment with the recommendation.
There'll be future. I mean, there's always more to look at. The 750 was more, we were looking at half of the amount that was over the threshold. So we didn't want to go too far because we wanted to still cover the village. So we looked at, and I think we had talked about that before at one point, was, if we do have anything, it would be like, well, if we have 2 million, we would only want to do 1 million, and then we split it down, pardon me, to 75-25. So I'm comfortable with that. And it still leaves 1 million plus over our threshold.
Yep.
And so, yes, and now we need more in the future? There's 750 enough? Probably not. Just based on the amount of projects and other things that we have. But it's a good starting point, and it keeps enough in the general fund to still keep the general fund just fine.
Got it.
And the 250, pardon me, it was, when it works itself out, it's actually a 10% increase for both pension funds. So it's almost, that's 250 worked out perfect.
Got it. Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry, we wanted to, because I think we were talking at one point about doing 10% above the recommended contribution, and that comes out to just about 10%.
I'm good with everything then.
All right, Cheryl, Tom.
I'm in agreement as well.
I'm fine with everything.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you, Bruce.
It's unrelated, but it's related. So
Hey, it's not trying to get it out. So
the question really comes down to the 794. I may have missed it. Did we publish anything and talk about how many people participated in the water bill program? And so that also from the business perspective, I mean, this was our incentive was, and I like your spin on it. We had $794,000 spent. $79,000 spent in this village for resident in here, for a mere $20,000. So somehow we need to, if I missed it, sorry.
So we put,
Spin it.
so we've been following the restaurant rewards program success over the months that it was implemented. And then I've been posting that on our business e-news. And then the final results were just posted last Friday.
Perfect.
In that e-news.
It was a success. We liked it. It wasn't, it worked out great from our standpoint of processing everything, and it wasn't overly burdensome, and it was a win-win for everybody. It worked out well.
Perfect.
all right. Well, I think we've got the consensus of the board, so appreciate the recommendations, and we'll continue to accept what staff has advised. So I think overall story is great for residents. We're putting the money to good work and spending it today for today's value instead of waiting for inflation to catch us on the back end here. So it'll be a lot of fun projects down the road. So appreciate that and all the work that went into this. Hopefully more good news on the horizon. So we'll have a fun workshop in August. So get ready to participate, and we'll have some good report out for the village in that regard. So that ends our agenda for new business. Is there any other business that trustees would like to bring to the surface for discussion? All right, seeing none, I would just continue to block your calendar for that first workshop date that we'll be having in August, and hopefully we'll see everyone at the Taste this weekend. So forecast is looking fantastic. So looking forward to seeing all the friendly faces out there. We don't have any executive session tonight. So with that being said, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Me. Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Any abstentions?